Today we're going to be discussing Adlerian therapy. Alfred Adler is considered the father and the founder of Adlerian therapy, or the theory. Adler worked along with Sigmund Freud, but he split from Sigmund Freud because of the importance Freud placed on sexuality and his concept of the collective unconscious. Alfred Adler didn't agree with that, so he's considered one of the dissenters from Sigmund Freud, he along with Carl Jung. Adler refers to the center of the nucleus of the person as the creative self, emphasizing the creative potential to interact with the world. So when you think of Alfred Adler and his theory, you think of the creative self. Now, take a minute, pause the video, and go look at this particular video in YouTube. Now we're going to do a comparison of Freud and Adler's concepts. Now remember, Adler worked along with Sigmund Freud initially, and then he dissented, he left. He didn't want to deal with him because of a different point of view. Freud's considered it's a medical model. Adler is more of a growth model, which means that we create, we change, and we can grow. Freud says people are just sick. Adler says people are discouraged. They're not sick, they're discouraged. So if we help them, then we can help them move forward and help them create or recreate themselves to be the persons that they want to be. Medicine cures according to Freud. Encouragement cures according to Adler. Freud has a reductionistic, it's considered reductionistic because it divides individuals into parts that were antagonistics toward each other. For example, the id, the ego, and the superego. There's always this conflict that's going on between them. And what is that called? Interpsychic conflict. Interpsychic. Or versus is more of an antagonistic approach because there's always two things that are in adversarial roles competing with each other, like the unconscious versus the conscious. Adler is more of a holistic approach because the individual is indivisible. You can't divide them all. All parts, the memory, the emotions, the behavior, are in the service of the individual and his or her goal. So they all work together. Freud feels that past plays a prominent role. Look to the past to find out what is going wrong. Where Adler says, no. The past is useful in identifying patterns, but which we can change. The individual has the determination and that creative self, they can change these things. Freud is more objective in his approach, where Adler is subjective. It's subjective to the individual's perceptions. Freud says people are victims of their instinct. Adler says people are choosers, and they can shape their internal and external environment. They can control those things. Freud says the study of the individual centers on the intrapersonal, the intrapsychic, the conflict that's going on between those things within the personality. Adler says people can be understood only interpersonally. Inter, and remember what I told you inter was? Between two different individuals. And as social beings moving through and interacting with their environment. Now, what I would like to add is that with Freud, the mental struggle is often unconscious, arising from the clash of incompatible or opposing impulses, wishes, desires, and external demands. Adler says, social interest, belief, and people have a basic need. People have a basic need to belong to a larger whole. So he has this teleo belief in goal-striving nature of people. without behavior being purposeful and helping people achieve goals. People are not victims of biology or circumstances, but can choose to change both their goals and their behaviors. Now, another thing that I would like to say about Adler, he rejects Freud's view that the urge to develop loving and intimate ties with others is primarily rooted in biologically based libido drives. We talked about libido with Freud. Those things, Adler disputes those things. Adler said that there's this universal need to give and receive love that represents a vital dimension in every person's social interest. Adler's view of human nature is that it's more of an optimistic view. People are positive and are capable of self-determination. He focuses on dignity and the worth of the individual. It's based on the concept of holism. Look at all the components that make up the personality, including the environment. Remember, Freud said this is something that was going on within. There's an internal struggle. We don't pay attention to what's really going on in the environment. Remember, in his dreams, in his interpretation of dreams, we looked at symbols and things of that nature. So Adler's saying, no, this is something that's more bigger. It's something that's more holistic. The structure of the personality, according to Adler, emphasizes the importance of early life experiences within the family origin, or basically the family constellation. So he looks at things like birth order, sibling rivalry, and social interest. The key concepts for Adlerian therapy is the center of the nucleus is considered the creative self. The creative self is the heart of Adlerian therapy. The creative self. Now, what was the heart of, or the cornerstone of Freudian's approach, of the Freudian approach? Transference. If you said transference, you got it right. The creative self is considered the heart of the Adlerian therapy, is the center of the nucleus from which all life movement generates. The center from which all life movement generates. The person has the potential to creatively impact the world, is what he's saying. Then we have a teleological movement. This particular movement is teleological in nature because it has a purpose and is directed toward a goal. It can be on the useful or the useless side. That's what Adler states. Also, the psychology of use. All behavior has a use or a payoff that is usually unconscious in nature. Emotions propel a person toward a goal. So remember that from the Adlerian point of view, all behavior has a use or a payoff that is usually unconscious in nature. So another key concept he talked about was the phenomenological perspective. That means that we're understanding clients' internal frame of reference, understanding their interpretation of their experiences. How did you experience this? Because you remember I've told you all clients are unique. And because one person experiences one thing and they've gone through the same type of trauma, another person will experience it totally different. So these are some some additional key concepts that Adler talks about. Next, he talks about social interest, the need for all humans to feel love and affection to be fulfilled. The need for all humans to feel love and affection to be fulfilled. That's what Adler basically said. We have to have this social interest. And as part of that, it's because it comes from our need to feel love and affection, to feel like we are fulfilled or whole. You'll hear some of the text or some of the research using the word validity, feeling sense of validity. That's similar. Now, another thing that Adler looked at was the family constellation. He said that birth order has a significant impact on the development of the personality. A significant impact on the development of the personality. Adler says that each individual is unique and they have a significant impact on the development of their lifestyles based on the birth order. The firstborn is generally bossy and talkative because they're used to telling siblings what to do. They are conservative because they are born into a world of adults. They're not born into a world of children. They dealt with adults most of the time. Secondborn makes the firstborn feel dethroned and can be suspicious and tend to protect themselves from sudden reversal of roles. The middleborn tends to be ambitious because they feel the need to compete with the older siblings. They have difficulty feeling a sense of belonging because they do not have a special place of the oldest and the youngest. This can cause sibling rivalry, but they also tend to be observers, there tend to be observers and mediators, the middle child. Now the youngest, Adler says that the parents tend to be more lenient and give them special favors, which cause them to believe that people will take care of them and protect them from life difficulties. Does that sound like you? Or sound like your siblings, or maybe sound like your children? Now, after Adler's individual psychology, again, birth order and sibling relationships is very, very important. Understanding. Therapy is teaching, informing, and encouraging. That's what we're all talking about. So has more of a positive, optimistic view. Basic mistakes are in the client's private logic, and the therapeutic relationship is a collaborative partnership. Remember that thing that I talked about, the TA, therapeutic alliance. An alliance means working together. Adler is more in agreement with that particular approach. Based on Adler's own experiences and on the work of Darwin, social behavior is important in the development of normal and abnormal behavior. Now, for Darwin, species that formed tight groups were more successful than those who lived in isolation. So that's why Adler is saying things like that social interest, that need to feel loved and accepted, that helps. Adler also, when we're looking at social embeddedness, from birth to adult, all behavior can be construed as having social meaning. An example, wanting to belong. Wanting to belong can be viewed in terms of family, significant others, or professional or social groups. Another example, at birth, we are dependent upon others for our survival. In adulthood, in order to be completely functional, we must learn to cooperate with others. See the reverse there? When we're talking about basic mistakes are those self-defeating attitudes and belief within a person's lifestyle. They are cognitions that can be disputed and changed, often reflect avoidance or withdrawal from others. There is excessive self-interest and desire for power. These are basic mistakes. These are the things that Adler talks about in his particular theory. This feelings of inferiority. Adlerian psychologists focuses on people's efforts to compensate for their self-perceived inferiority to others. These feelings of inferiority can derive from one's position in the family constellation, particularly if early experiences of humiliation occurred. A specific physical condition or defect exists, or there is a general lack of social feelings for others that was present. So that's where Adler says this derives from, particularly some early experience where there was maybe some humiliation. What I want to do here is we're going to talk about the 5 psychological positions, and Adler's talking about birth order and interpretation of one's position in the family. I just talked about in the slide prior. Now, when we're looking at birth order and the psychological positioning, in this particular slide, I'd like to say that Birth order and interpretation of one's position in the family have a lot to do with how adults interact in the world. In childhood, we acquire certain styles of relating to others. In a form, a picture, we tend to form a picture of self that is carried into our adult interactions. Now, based upon birth order, Adler says there's 5 psychological positions. The oldest child receives more attention, spoiled, and the center of attention. Second of only 2 behaves as if they're in a race, often opposite of the first child. The middle often feels squeezed out. The youngest is the baby. If they're an only child, does not learn to share or cooperate with other children, learns to deal with adults. So when we're looking at that perspective of birth order. Now, from the phenomenological approach, Adlerians attempt to view the world from the client's subjective frame of reference. They attempt to view the world from the client's subjective frame of reference. What are we talking about? How life is in reality is less important than how the individual believes life to be. Repeat that phrase to yourself. Also, our present interpretation of childhood experiences matter more than the actual events. Also, unconscious instincts in our past do not determine our behavior. So, which was what Freud basically believed, right? Adler said that's not the truth. It has to deal with your interpretation or your subjective frame of reference. Another key component we talk about with Adler is social interest. Adler's most significant and distinctive concept, social interest, refers to an individual's attitude toward the awareness of being a part of the human community. It embodies a community feeling and emphasizes the client's positive feelings toward others in the world. Mental health is measured by the degree to which we successfully share with others and are concerned with their welfare. Mental health is measured by the degree to which we successfully share with others and are concerned with their welfare. Got that? Happiness and success are related to social connectedness. That's Adler's particular view. Now, this particular video I absolutely love. I want you to look at it and see how people view themselves. It's amazing. It's different. And what I want you to think about is perception, social interest, how people see themselves in the world and how others see them. Pause the video, open up another page, copy the URL, or go to YouTube and enter the video. Now, after seeing the last video, Adler talks about these particular things that are called lifestyle beliefs. And I want you to think about these things as I discuss each one of these particular points. The self-concept, convictions about who I am, how the person saw themselves when the artist was drawing them. Examples of self-concept could be, I'm at the mercy of others. I can screw up. I am a sensitive and caring person. Now, the self-idea, the convictions about what I should be or I'm obliged to be to have a place, is these things are basically things like, in order to have a place, I should not make a mistake. I must not lose control. These are some ideals and things that people have in their head. So the self-concept and the self-ideal are different. The ideal of self, or the Welt build or picture of the world's convictions about the world, people, nature, etc., and what the world demands of me. Now, These beliefs could be that life is scary, it's a punishing place. Women can be emotional and overact. Now, when I'm talking about these first 3 points, the concept, the self concept, that's how the person saw themselves. The self idea, that contributed to the way that they describe themselves to them. Because when we talk about the self idea, um, again, they're like about what I should be. And you'll have to deal with that, especially with people that have gotten to a place in life and they're looking back and they're reflecting, which a lot of your consumers are going to do. Then that that plays a huge part on what you're doing. Okay. When I say what you're doing, that plays a huge part in your sessions with them. And when you're looking at comparing this self concept and this self idea to each other, the well built picture. That's how the picture of the world's convictions about the world. I would say that when the individuals described the person to the artist and he drew them, that aligns with this particular idea. That self idea, or in this, the well build, you can see little traces of this when the person that looked at the picture or of themselves, I'll say, let me just stop because I feel like I might confuse you here. I'm going to go back and just make it really, really simple and clear. Okay, the self concept, when the artist was drawing them, this is what they saw. The self idea is when they looked at the pictures of themselves and that the artist had drawn, and they were talking about basically what this person possibly. Understanding private logic. When we're talking about private logic, we're talking about the individual's opinion of him or herself and the world and their apperceptive schema, which is their interpretations. All aspects of the style of life influence every psychological process has. The process of understanding by which newly observed qualities of an object are related to the past experience. Now, if the lifestyle consists of the client's views about him or herself, the world, and their behaviors, then it follows that we can understand private logic by completing the following sentences. Having the person say, I am. The world is. Therefore, I must. I am. Others are. The world is. Therefore, in order to have a place to belong, I must. Basic mistakes. Now, we talked about mistakes before when we were talking about Adler. Remember that basic mistakes are the self-defeating attitude, beliefs within a person's lifestyle. There are cognitions that can be disputed and challenged. So when we're thinking about basic mistakes, now Adler taught that clients' lifestyle can be viewed as a personal mythology. These mythologies are true for the individual, and so the individual acts accordingly. Now, these mythologies are truths and partial truths, but they can also be myths that one confuses for truths. These things are called basic mistakes, myths that are confused for truths that people hold. One is the overgeneralization, such as people are hostile, life is dangerous. That's an overgeneralization. All people are not hostile, and not all aspects of life is dangerous. Then there's these misperceptions of life. Life doesn't give me any breaks. Look at the little graphic I have here. I am afraid of the world will end in 2000. 2012. I fear that the world will continue without changing anything. Did the world end in 2012? No, it didn't. That's the truth. Now, when we talk about activity, for each of the situations below, this is what I would like for you to discuss with yourself, or just take a moment and pause the video and look at these things. Discuss what thoughts, feelings, or actions would result if your private logic said either the world is friendly and I am competent. Your child receives a bad grade report in school. If you view it from the idea that, or the logic that, the world is friendly and I am competent, how do you say that? Or the world is hostile and I am inadequate. Think about these things. Take a minute, look through each one of them, and think about them. Pause the video. Now, Adler says there are 5 particular life tasks. Before I go through each and discuss each, I just want to add this, that Adlerian Therapy helps clients to effectively navigate life's tasks. Social interest best reflected in accomplishment in life tasks. Now, from an Adlerian perspective, a person's mental health is significantly impacted by the ability to establish friendships and to maintain meaningful relationships with others. Their mental health is significantly impacted by these things. People who have difficulty establishing and maintaining meaningful friendships commonly experience varying degrees of depression, frustration, anger, and social alienation. Okay? Adler believed these negative psychosocial experiences lead many people to seek help in counseling and therapy. Now we're looking at these 5 tasks. Adlerian Therapy helps clients to effectively navigate these lifestyle tasks: friendship, love, spirituality, and self-acceptance. These tasks are aimed at the development of a feeling of responsibility to the greater good of society. If one task is not fulfilled, the others will be affected. Remember that. If one task is not fulfilled, the others will be affected. Thus, a solution to one has an impact on the other. When we look at friendship, best indicator of a person's social interest, because one's relationship with significant friends express one's attitude toward the whole community. Work, only most discouraged people avoid work. Love, relating and understanding to another person, fulfillment demands a maximum of social interest because it requires close contact with others. Spirituality, relationship with God, religion, universe, and the meaning of life. Self-acceptance, deciding how we think and feel about ourselves. These are these 5 life tasks. When we talk about the phases of the therapy, this is where we're going to go through the different phases when we're talking about Adlerian therapy. Lifestyle. Convictions developed early in life to help them understand, predict, and control experiences. Think about that, lifestyle. We're thinking about lifestyle as we discuss these 4 phases of therapy. The first phase is establishing the proper therapeutic relationship. That's called what? TA, Therapeutic Alliance. In doing so, in developing or establishing, you are creating a supportive, collaborative, educational, encouraging process. Person-to-person contact with the client precedes identification of the problem, and it helps the client build awareness of his or her strengths. So this is what you're doing when you're building rapport during that first phase of the therapy. The second phase is exploring the individual's psychological dynamics, where you're doing a lifestyle assessment. This assessment can be a subjective interview, which helps the client tell his or her story or the question. An objective interview, which the goal is to discover information about problems, precipitating events, medical history, social history, etc. Then we're looking at the family constellation, early recollections, basic mistakes, family constellation, birth order, these things. We're looking at these particular things. The next phase is phase 3, encouraging self-understanding and insight. Encouraging understanding and insight by interpret the findings of the assessment. Hidden goals and purpose of behavior are made conscious. The therapist offers interpretations to help the client gain insight into their private logic and lifestyle. Adlerians are concerned with understanding the unique and private beliefs and strategies, one's lifestyle, that each individual creates in childhood. This cognitive schema and lifestyle serve as the individual's reference for attitudes, behaviors, and one's private view of self, others, and the world. It is when we have looked at our early life experiences, examined the patterns of behavior that repeat themselves in our lives, and the methods by which we go about trying to gain significance and belonging, with healing, growth, and change occur. The last phase of the therapy is reorientation and re-educate. Reorientation, re-educate. This is an action-oriented phase. The emphasis is on putting insight into practice. The client reoriented toward the useful side of life, re-educating, reorienting them. In Adlerian therapy, when we're doing the re-education and reorienting, and when we're in the phases of the process, encouragement is the big thing. Remember, Adler thought that encouragement cured. Okay? Now, encouragement, the most distinctive intervention, central to all phases of the Adlerian therapy. It's central to it. It is a fundamental attitude more than a technique. Expecting clients to assume responsibility for their lives builds their self-confidence and courage. Expecting them to assume responsibility for their lives builds their self-confidence and courage. Discouragement. Now, discouragement is the basic condition that prevents people from functioning. You know what? Yes, you can. You can do this. You have the potential to do it based on the things that you've told me. Remember when you were talking about a difficult situation that you were going through and how you overcame it? That's some type of encouragement. It also refers to increasing a person's courage to face the difficulties in life. Encourage people are willing to take risk and engage in things that lead toward growth. Encourage people see the world as benign. Discouragement, the feeling of not belonging in a useful and constructive manner, can come from within. These disturbed cognitions are without these adverse life conditions. Discouraged people see the world as a hostile place. They do not take any risk. They become rigid with their beliefs and do not look for growth opportunities. Discouragement is psychopathological, the root of difficulties and concerns in life. Discouragement from family, parents, peers, and society can contribute to problems by lowering self-esteem, self-worth, contribute to feelings of inferiority. We teach clients we cannot change the past, but we can change their feelings about the past. Remember that. We cannot change the past, but we can change their feelings. Now, let's compare encouragement versus discouragement. According to Adler, when we feel encouraged, we feel capable and appreciated and will generally act in a connected and cooperative way. When we are discouraged, we may act in unhealthy ways by competing, withdrawing, or giving up. It is in finding ways of expressing and accepting encouragement, respect, and social interests that help us feel fulfilled and optimistic. The strength of the Adlerian approach from a diversity perspective. Remember that Many of the theories have been criticized because there wasn't a multicultural component included. The Adlerian approach stresses the effects of social class, racism, sex, and gender on the behavior of individuals. The therapeutic process is grounded within a client's culture and world, so this can help. Contemporary Adlerians appreciate the role of spirituality and religion in the lives of clients, since these factors are manifestations of social interest and the responsibility to others. When we're talking about spirituality and religion, remember those two things are different. And another thing here, remember we talked about your values and how you don't bring those things into the session and let them influence or impact the way that you communicate or assist your consumer or client. This is where these things can easily seep their way in, especially if you identify with the person that's in front of you. Spirituality and religion, they're two different things. But this is where most individuals tend to see the manifestation of these social interests and their responsibility. They feel like they have a responsibility to help others because of these particular things. So remember those things. Limitations from a diversity perspective. Limitations from a diversity perspective. The approach focuses on the self as the locus of change and responsibility. Emphasis on changing the autonomous self may be problematic for many clients. It has the potential drawbacks for those who are not interested in exploring their past childhood experiences, early memories, family experiences, and dreams. Some people just don't want to talk about it. If clients expect the therapist to be the expert, they may be dissatisfied with this collaborative stance of the Adlerian therapist. Whereas with the Freudian or psychoanalytical approach, the counselor was considered the expert, remember? Contributions of Adlerian therapy. This approach is flexible and integrative. It allows for the use of relational, cognitive, behavioral, emotive, and experiential techniques. It is suited to brief, time-limited therapy, whereas, remember, Sigmund Freud's therapy tend to be pretty long, intensive, rigorous. This one is rather short and brief. Many of Adler's ideas were revolutionary and far ahead of his time. Many of his ideas have found their way into most of the other therapeutic approaches. Limitations of the Adlerian approach. Adler spent most of his time teaching this theory as opposed to systematically documenting it. So therefore, some people consider his theory to be somewhat simplistic. Many of Adler's theoretical constructs, an example, lifestyles, are difficult to measure and require empirical testing, saying that these things require some additional testing, research to prove that they work, and that they're more qualitative versus quantitative. So, research on the treatment efficacy of this particular theory or therapy is very limited. So, they're saying that there needs to be some additional research. And that's the end of this discussion on Alfred Adler and the Adlerian therapy or theory.